I am Jarvis, your storyteller. Welcome to the Science Fiction Exploration. If you like the story, please subscribe to our channel.
Nova Quinn's hands were covered in engine grease when the most powerful being in the Centaurus arm of the galaxy walked into her repair bay. She didn't notice him at first, too focused on the complicated warp core maintenance she was performing on a merchant vessel. The sound of her plasma torch drowned out the sudden hush that fell over the usually bustling station. The quantum alignment is off by 0.3 degrees, she muttered to herself, making minute adjustments to the core's crystalline matrix. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and her standard-issue jumpsuit bore the patches and stains of countless hours spent keeping ships running. "Your assessment is impressively precise," came a voice like distant thunder. Nova didn't look up. "If you're here about the Halcyon's repairs, I told Jensen it'll be ready when it's ready. These things can't be rushed." "I am not here about the Halcyon." Something in that voice finally made Nova turn around. Standing before her was a towering figure nearly 9 feet tall, with iridescent scales that shifted between deep purple and midnight blue. 2 curved horns swept back from a regal head, and eyes like molten gold studied her with unsettling intensity. Behind him stood an entourage of equally impressive Drachnid warriors, their ceremonial armor gleaming under the harsh repair bay lights. Nova's hand tightened on her wrench. "Emperor Xerex," she said, recognizing him from news broadcasts. "To what does Waypoint Station owe the honor?" "You repaired my scout ship 3 cycles ago," he said, his tail moving in a slow arc, the one that limped in with catastrophic damage to its quantum drive. "The XR-7? Yeah, that was a tough job. Had to basically rebuild the whole containment chamber from scratch." Nova shrugged. "But it worked out fine in the end." "Fine?" Xerex's inner eyelids flickered. "You improved its efficiency by 37%. No one in my empire has managed such a feat." Nova wiped her hands on a rag, uncomfortable with the praise. "Just did what needed doing. Ships need to run right, or people die. Simple as that. Nothing about what you did was simple." Xerex stepped forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over her workbench. "You have shown exceptional skill, innovation, and dedication to perfection. These are qualities highly valued among my people." "Thanks," Nova said cautiously. "But I'm sure you didn't come all this way just to compliment my repair work." "Indeed not." Xerex raised his clawed hand, and one of his attendants stepped forward with an ornate box. "I have come to offer you a position of honor within the Drachnid Empire. As my mate." The wrench clattered from Nova's suddenly numb fingers. Around them, the other mechanics and station workers who had gathered to watch fell completely silent. She could hear the distant hum of the station's artificial gravity generators. "Your mate?" Nova managed to say. "Yes. You would be elevated to Imperial Consort, with authority over our technological development and innovation programs. Your skills would help advance our entire civilization." Nova looked at the box, which had been opened to reveal a collar-like device made of some exotic metal she'd never seen before. It seemed to pulse with its own inner light, and intricate patterns swirled across its surface like living things. "Let me get this straight," she said slowly. "Because I fixed your ship, you want me to marry you and join your empire?" "The maintenance of Imperial vessels is a sacred duty among my people," Xerex explained. "By demonstrating such exceptional ability, you have proven yourself worthy of the highest honor we can bestow." Nova ran a hand through her hair, leaving a streak of grease she didn't notice. "Look, I appreciate the offer, but I can't accept. I'm just a mechanic. I fix ships because that's what I'm good at, not because I'm looking for honors or titles." "You underestimate your own worth," Xerex said. "The improvements you made to that single vessel have already saved dozens of lives. Imagine what you could accomplish with the resources of an empire at your disposal." "I don't need an empire's resources," Nova replied firmly. "I need my tools, my workshop, and the freedom to do my job without political complications. Being an imperial consort sounds like it comes with a lot of strings attached. Xerx's tail twitched, the only sign that her refusal had affected him. The position comes with responsibilities, yes. But also great privileges and opportunities. Opportunities one never asked for, Nova pointed out. I'm sorry, but my answer is no. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a warp core to finish calibrating before this ship's crew misses their delivery window. She turned back to her work, hoping the gesture would end the conversation. Instead, she heard Xerx take another step forward. Perhaps you need time to consider the full implications of this offer, he said. I will remain at this station for 3 standard days. The honor of joining the Imperial line is not something to be decided hastily. Nova's shoulders tensed. And if I still say no after 3 days? Then I will respect your decision, Xerx said, though something in his tone suggested he had never faced such a refusal before. But I urge you to think carefully about what you might accomplish as part of something greater than yourself. With that, he and his entourage withdrew, leaving Nova alone with her tools and thoughts. As the crowd of onlookers gradually dispersed, she tried to focus on the warp core's delicate adjustments, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Station Chief Reeves appeared at her elbow a few minutes later. Well, he said, that's not something you see every day. Tell me about it, Nova muttered. Any chance we could pretend it never happened? Considering half the station just witnessed it, I'd say no. Reeves scratched his beard. What are you going to do? Nova tightened a bolt with perhaps more force than necessary. My job. Same as always. But as she said it, she couldn't shake the feeling that her simple life of repairs and maintenance had just become far more complicated than any malfunctioning warp core. Word spread through Waypoint Station faster than a quantum transmission. By the time Nova arrived for her shift the next morning, it seemed everyone knew about Emperor Xerx's proposal. She ignored the whispers and stares, focusing instead on her work roster for the day. There were 16 ships requiring maintenance, and she wasn't about to let imperial politics interfere with her schedule. She had just finished diagnosing a faulty plasma injector when Commander Thess, the station's security chief, appeared at her workstation. The tall Andorian's antennae twitched with barely contained excitement. The Imperial delegation has requested your presence for a formal dinner tonight, Thess announced, holding out a crystalline data pad. They've taken over the entire diamond quarter of the station's residential ring. Nova didn't look up from her diagnostic tool. Tell them I'm busy. Got a backup of repair work that needs handling. Nova, Thess said, her voice dropping to a whisper, you can't just refuse an Imperial summons. Do you have any idea how many diplomatic protocols you're violating? Don't know, don't care. Nova finally looked up, her eyes hard. I didn't ask for any of this. I'm not playing their political games. Before Thess could respond, a new voice joined their conversation. Games? Is that what you think this is? They turned to find a drachnid female standing nearby, her scales a lighter shade of blue than Xerx's. She wore what appeared to be scholarly robes rather than armor, and her bearing suggested authority of a different kind than the warriors. I am High Scholar Vexel, she said, inclining her head slightly. I serve as the Emperor's cultural advisor. May we speak privately? Nova glanced at her chronometer. I've got 10 minutes before I need to start on the Starweaver's coolant system. Vexel gestured to a nearby conference room, and Nova reluctantly followed. As soon as the door closed behind them, the scholar's formal demeanor softened slightly. You must understand, Vexel began, that the Emperor's offer is not merely a personal matter. It represents a potential shift in the entire balance of power in our sector of space. All the more reason for me to stay out of it, Nova replied. I'm not interested in being a political pawn. On the contrary. Vexel's tail moved in what Nova was beginning to recognize as a gesture of emphasis. You would be far more than a pawn. The Emperor's mate holds significant influence over technological development throughout the Empire. Your innovative approaches could revolutionize our entire infrastructure. Nova leaned against the wall, crossing her arms. And what about what I want? Has anyone considered that? What do you want, Nova Quinn? To do my job. To fix ships and solve problems without getting tangled up in imperial politics or ancient traditions I don't understand. Vexel studied her for a moment. Your dedication to your craft is admirable. But perhaps you fail to see the larger picture. The Empire's technology has grown stagnant in recent years. We adhere to traditions and protocols that may no longer serve their original purpose. Someone with your practical perspective could be exactly what we need. Nova felt a headache building behind her eyes. Look, I appreciate what you're saying. But I've seen what happens when people get caught up in power struggles they never asked for. My parents were engineers on a frontier colony. They died when political rivalries turned into armed conflict. I swore I'd never let myself get pulled into that kind of mess. And yet, Vexel said softly, by refusing the Emperor's offer, you may already be involved. There are those in the Empire who will see your rejection as an insult to our entire civilization. That's their problem, not mine. Is it? Vexel moved closer, her voice dropping further. Already, there are whispers among certain factions. Some suggest that humans are too primitive to appreciate the honor being offered. Others see your refusal as a sign that humanity is growing too independent, too resistant to proper authority. Nova's jaw tightened. Are you threatening me? I am warning you. The Empire's political machinery is vast and complex. Whether you accept or refuse, your decision will have consequences far beyond this station. Before Nova could respond, her communicator chimed. The Starweaver's captain, reminding her about the coolant system. I have to go, she said, pushing away from the wall. Ships don't fix themselves. Consider this, Vexel said as Nova reached the door. Perhaps the best way to avoid becoming a pawn is to become a player instead. Nova paused, her hand on the door control. I'll think about it. But don't expect me to change my mind. She spent the rest of her shift buried in repair work, trying to lose herself in the familiar rhythms of maintenance and troubleshooting. But Vexel's words kept echoing in her mind, making her wonder if she was being naive about the whole situation. As she was finishing up for the day, a junior mechanic named Raj approached her workstation, practically vibrating with excitement. Is it true? He asked. Did you really turn down the Emperor of the Drachnids? Nova sighed, setting down her tools. News travels fast. Are you kidding? It's all anyone's talking about. There's even a betting pool on whether you'll change your mind. He lowered his voice. I put credits on you sticking to your guns. At least someone believes in me, Nova muttered. But seriously, Raj continued, why'd you say no? I mean, think about the tech you'd have access to. Their quantum engineering is decades ahead of ours. Because I like my life the way it is, Nova snapped, then immediately regretted her harsh tone. Sorry, Raj. It's been a long day. He held up his hands. No offense taken. But you might want to know. There's a whole delegation of Drachnid engineers hanging around the main concourse. Word is they're hoping to see your work firsthand. Nova groaned. Perfect. Just perfect. She gathered her tools, trying to decide whether to head straight to her quarters or risk facing more attention in the station's public areas. Before she could decide, her communicator chirped again. This time it was Station Chief Reeves. Quinn, he said, his voice tense. We've got a situation. A Drachnid warship just dropped out of warp with severe damage to their containment systems. They're requesting emergency repairs, and they're asking for you specifically. Nova closed her eyes, already knowing where this was heading. Let me guess. They're part of the Emperor's fleet? His personal guard, apparently. How soon can you get to docking bay 7? She looked at her dirty jumpsuit, her grease-stained hands, and thought about the political implications hiding behind this convenient emergency. On my way, she said finally. But this doesn't change anything. As she headed for the docking bay, Nova couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into carefully laid trap. The question was, who had said it, and what were they really after? The damaged Drachnid warship loomed in docking bay 7, its sleek hull marred by what looked like weapons fire. Nova's trained eye immediately spotted the telltale signs of a deliberate attack rather than an accidental malfunction. She kept that observation to herself as she approached the vessel's main airlock, her diagnostic kit slung over her shoulder. Captain Kraz, the ship's commander, met her at the entrance. Unlike most Drachnids she'd encountered, his scales were a deep crimson, and battle scars crisscrossed his armored chest. "The containment breach is spreading," he said without preamble. "We have less than 2 hours before total system failure." Nova activated her handheld scanner. "Show me." As they moved through the ship's corridors, she noticed the crew's suspicious glances. Some seemed angry, others curious, but all of them watched her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. When they reached engineering, she understood why. The containment system wasn't just damaged, it had been sabotaged. Expertly and precisely, with knowledge of exactly where to strike to make it look like external damage. "Well?" Kraz demanded. "Can you repair it?" Nova studied the readings on her scanner. "Yes, but I need to know what really happened here first." The captain's inner eyelids flickered. "I don't understand." "This wasn't combat damage," Nova said, pointing to specific sections of the system. "Someone on your crew did this. Someone who knows Drachnid engineering inside and out. So before I start repairs, I want to know what I'm really walking into." Kraz was silent for a long moment, his tail completely still, a sign of deep tension among his species. Finally, he dismissed the other engineers from the room with a sharp gesture. "There are factions within the Empire," he said quietly, "who oppose the Emperor's interest in you." "You mean his marriage proposal?" "They believe mixing Imperial blood with other species will weaken us. They see his offer as a sign that he has grown soft, too willing to embrace outside influences." Nova's hands clenched around her scanner. "So they sabotaged his personal guard's flagship to what? Make some kind of statement?" "To force a confrontation," Kraz corrected. "If we lose containment, the resulting explosion would destroy half the station. The Emperor would be forced to respond with military action. It would effectively end any possibility of alliance with humans. And kill thousands of innocent people in the process." Nova felt sick. She set down her kit and pulled out her tools. "How high up does this conspiracy go?" "High enough to be dangerous. But not everyone in the Empire shares their views. Many of us see the value in new perspectives, in evolution rather than stagnation." Nova began working on the containment system, her movements precise and focused. "You're taking a risk telling me this." "Perhaps. But you took a risk coming here, knowing it might be a trap." Kraz moved closer, lowering his voice further. "The Emperor's interest in you was never solely about your repair of his scout ship. He has been watching humanity's technological development for years, seeing how you adapt and innovate where we merely preserve and maintain." "So this isn't about marriage at all," Nova said, not looking up from her work. "It's about changing your entire society. The two are not mutually exclusive. In our culture, the Emperor's mate helps shape the direction of our civilization. Your practical approach to problems, your willingness to question established methods, these qualities could help reform centuries of rigid thinking." Nova connected a bypass circuit, buying them some time. "That's an awful lot of responsibility to dump on one human mechanic." You would not be alone. There are many within the Empire who desire change but lack the authority to implement it. The Emperor's protection would give them the freedom to speak out, to challenge outdated traditions. And start a civil war in the process? Nova shifted to another damaged section. Because that's what this sabotage suggests would happen. Kraz's tail moved in what might have been acknowledgement. Change never comes without resistance. But the alternative is slow decay, a gradual dimming of our civilization's light. Nova worked in silence for several minutes, her mind racing as fast as her hands. Everything was bigger than she'd imagined, the politics, the consequences, the potential for both progress and disaster. A small explosion from deeper in the ship interrupted her thoughts. Alarms began blaring, and Kraz's communicator crackled with urgent reports. Secondary containment is failing, a voice announced. Cascade reaction imminent. Nova swore under her breath. They must have planted backup charges. This whole thing was rigged to fail no matter what. Can you stop it? She was already moving, running toward the source of the new crisis. Maybe. But I'll have to break about a dozen Imperial engineering protocols to do it. Do whatever is necessary, Kraz called after her. Protocol be damned. Nova reached the secondary containment chamber and found it in chaos. Standard safety measures had locked down the controls, preventing anyone from attempting the very solutions that might save them. She pulled off an access panel and began rewiring the system from scratch. What are you doing? One of the Drachnid engineers demanded. Those are sacred configurations. Those sacred configurations are about to get us all killed, Nova snapped. Either help me or get out of my way. To her surprise, several of the younger engineers moved to assist her, following her rapid-fire instructions without hesitation. Together, they bypassed the ancient safeguards and implemented a completely new containment protocol, one that violated probably every rule in the Imperial engineering manuals. It worked. As the alarms finally fell silent, Nova sat back against the wall, exhausted. The Drachnid engineers stared at their modified systems with a mixture of horror and fascination. You just rewrote 3,000 years of established procedure, one of them said. No, Nova corrected, wiping sweat from her forehead. We did. And we did it because it needed to be done. That's what real engineering is about, solving problems, not following rules. She looked around at their faces and saw something she hadn't expected, hope. These weren't the rigid traditionalists she'd imagined all Drachnids to be. They were engineers like her, trapped in a system that valued stability over innovation. Kraz appeared in the doorway. The Emperor has been informed of the situation. He requests your presence immediately. Nova stood up slowly, her muscles protesting. Tell him I'll come after I finish stabilizing these systems. Some things are more important than protocol. The captain's scales rippled with what might have been amusement. I believe that is exactly why he chose you. Nova's meeting with Emperor Xerex took place in the station's observation dome, with the vast spiral of the galaxy spread out above them. She arrived still wearing her grease-stained jumpsuit, too tired to care about diplomatic protocols anymore. The Emperor stood at the viewport, his massive frame silhouetted against the stars. 2 guards flanked the entrance, but the usual crowd of advisors and attendants was notably absent. Your solution to the containment crisis, Xerex said without turning, has caused quite a stir among my engineers. Some are calling it blasphemy. Others are already implementing similar modifications across the fleet. I did what needed to be done, Nova replied. Same as I always do. Indeed. Now he turned to face her, his golden eyes seeming to glow in the starlight. And that is precisely why certain factions fear you. Not because you are human, but because you represent change itself. Nova moved to stand beside him at the viewport, watching a merchant ship detach from its docking clamps. The saboteurs, were they caught? Some. Others fled. The investigation continues. His tail moved in a gesture she was beginning to recognize as frustration. But they are merely symptoms of a deeper problem. My empire has grown too rigid, too bound by traditions that no longer serve their purpose. And you think marrying a human mechanic will fix that? I think providing an example of successful cooperation between our peoples might open minds that have been closed for centuries. He turned to study her profile. The modifications you made today, they required my engineers to violate dozens of sacred protocols. Yet they followed your lead because they saw the wisdom in your methods. Nova rubbed her temples, feeling the weight of the day's events. They followed my lead because they didn't want to die. Simple survival instinct. Perhaps. Or perhaps they were waiting for permission to think differently. Xerex moved closer, his presence both imposing and oddly comforting. You should know, the young engineers who assisted you have requested permanent assignments to human-operated stations. They wish to learn more of your innovative approaches. That made Nova look up sharply. You're letting them go? I am encouraging them. Change cannot be forced, but it can be nurtured. His inner eyelids flickered. Which brings us to the matter of my proposal. I still haven't changed my mind. No, but perhaps I have changed mine. At her surprised look, he continued. The traditional role of imperial consort is indeed bound by many protocols and restrictions. But traditions can be modified, when necessity demands it. Nova turned to face him fully. What are you suggesting? A new position. Not as a traditional mate, but as a bridge between our peoples. You would retain your independence, your work, but also have the authority to implement technological and cultural exchange programs. To break down barriers between human and drachnid engineering traditions. That, actually sounds useful, Nova admitted. But wouldn't that cause even more problems with the traditionalists? Almost certainly. But after today's events, many more of my people understand the cost of clinging to outdated ways. He gestured to the stars above them. The galaxy is changing, Nova Quinn. We must change with it, or we will be left behind. A comfortable silence fell between them as Nova considered his words. Below the observation dome, she could see repair crews working on the damaged warship, human and drachnid engineers moving together with newfound cooperation. The young engineers, she said finally. The ones who helped today. They're not the only ones who want change, are they? No. Many in our younger generations see the value in new perspectives. They simply lacked a catalyst for change. His scales rippled with what might have been amusement. You are not the first human I considered for this role, but you are the first who showed both the skill and the courage to challenge our ways directly. Nova's eyes narrowed. You planned this. Not the sabotage, but the situation. You knew I'd have to break protocols to save the ship. I suspected you would find an innovative solution, yes. Though the actual crisis was far more dangerous than I anticipated. He inclined his head slightly. I apologize for the manipulation, but I needed my people to see the value of human ingenuity firsthand. That's actually pretty clever. Nova couldn't help but smile. And more than a little devious. One does not lead an empire without learning some strategic thinking. His tail moved in what she now recognized as their equivalent of a shrug. Though I must admit, your complete disregard for traditional authority was not something I fully prepared for. Nova laughed, surprising herself. Yeah, well, authority doesn't keep ships flying. Good engineering does. Indeed. Xerex turned back to the viewport. I will give you one more day to consider my revised offer. But know this, whatever you decide, you have already changed my empire simply by being yourself. As if to emphasize his point, an alert sounded on Nova's communicator. The young drachnid engineers were requesting her presence in the repair bay. They had ideas for further modifications to their systems and wanted her input. "Looks like change is already happening," she said, glancing at the message. "The question is," Xerex replied, "are you willing to help guide it?" Nova looked out at the stars, thinking of all the possibilities, and problems, that lay ahead. The galaxy was indeed changing, and for the first time, she wondered if maybe she had a larger role to play in that change than she'd ever imagined. Nova spent her final day of decision not in meditation or political discussions, but doing what she did best, working on ships. The repair bay had become an unexpected fusion of human and drachnid engineering philosophies, with crews from both species sharing techniques and challenging assumptions. She was deep in the guts of a hybrid engine system, teaching a young drachnid named Keth about human improvisation techniques, when High Scholar Vexel found her. "The Emperor awaits your answer," Vexel said, watching with poorly concealed fascination as Nova used a makeshift tool to bypass a complex system. "I know." Nova connected two previously incompatible systems together, creating something entirely new. "But first, I want you to look at this." Vexel moved closer, her scholarly interest overtaking her diplomatic mission. The engine before them was a mess of human and drachnid technology, violating dozens of traditional protocols while achieving efficiency ratings that shouldn't have been possible. "This is..." Vexel searched for words. "Unprecedented." "This is the future," Nova corrected, standing up and wiping her hands. "Or it could be, if your people are willing to embrace it." She gestured to Keth. "Show her what you figured out." The young engineer eagerly demonstrated a modification he'd developed, combining drachnid precision with human adaptability. Vexel's tail twitched with surprise as she observed the results. "You created this?" she asked Keth. "With Nova's guidance," he admitted. "She showed me that our traditional methods aren't wrong, they're just incomplete. By combining approaches, we can achieve more than either of our species could alone." Nova watched the exchange with satisfaction. "That's why I asked you here first. Before I give the Emperor my answer, I want to know if your people are truly ready for this kind of change." Vexel studied the hybrid engine for a long moment. "When I first spoke to you about the political implications of the Emperor's offer, I saw only the surface possibilities. This is something far more profound." "It is," Nova agreed. "And it's also why I'm going to say yes to his offer, but with conditions." She led them out of the repair bay and through the station's corridors, where humans and drachnids were already working together with growing comfort. Word of the averted disaster had spread, along with stories of how cooperation had saved lives. "I won't be a traditional consort," Nova explained as they walked. "I won't sit in a palace or attend ceremonial functions. I want to establish a joint engineering academy, somewhere both species can learn from each other freely, without the weight of politics or tradition holding them back." They reached the observation dome where Xerex waited. The Emperor stood with Captain Kraz and several other high-ranking drachnids, all of whom turned to watch Nova's entrance. "You have reached a decision?" Xerex asked, his golden eyes intent. "I have." Nova stepped forward, her posture straight but relaxed. "I accept your offer of partnership, but not as your mate in the traditional sense. Instead, I propose something new, a formal alliance between our peoples, focused on technological and cultural exchange." She outlined her vision for the engineering academy, watching as the assembled drachnids reacted with varying degrees of surprise and interest. When she finished, Xerex was silent for a long moment. "You would refuse the honor of imperial marriage for this?" he asked finally. "I would refuse any honor that doesn't serve a greater purpose," Nova replied. "But I'm offering something better, a real partnership, one that could benefit both our peoples for generations to come." Captain Kraz moved forward. "My crew has already seen the potential of such cooperation. The modifications made during the crisis have improved our systems beyond what we thought possible. And my research suggests, Vexel added, that this kind of exchange could trigger a renaissance in both our civilizations. Xerx's scales rippled with complex emotions. You continue to surprise me, Nova Quinn. When I first proposed, I sought to bring human innovation into my empire through traditional means. You have shown me a better way. He moved to stand beside her at the viewport, both of them gazing out at the stars. I accept your conditions. We will establish this academy, and you will help guide our peoples toward a shared future, not as imperial consort, but as an equal partner in progress. Nova felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Then we have a deal. Indeed. Xerx's tail moved in what she now knew was amusement. Though I suspect this is only the beginning of many challenges to our traditional ways. Probably, Nova agreed with a smile. But that's what makes engineering interesting, there's always a new problem to solve, a better way to do things. As if to emphasize her point, Keth appeared in the doorway, excitement clear in his posture. Nova. We've found a way to integrate the quantum stabilizers with the human warp field generators. You need to see this. Nova glanced at Xerx, who inclined his head in permission. As she turned to follow Keth, the Emperor's voice stopped her. You have chosen a difficult path, he said. Change never comes easily, especially to an empire as old as ours. Nova looked back at him, her eyes bright with determination. The best solutions usually aren't the easy ones. But they're always worth the effort. As she left to examine the latest innovation, Xerx watched her go, understanding that while he hadn't gained a traditional mate, he had found something far more valuable, a partner who could help lead his people into a future where tradition and innovation could coexist, where both species could grow stronger together. In the repair bay below, human and drachnid engineers worked side by side, their differences forgotten in the shared joy of discovery. It wasn't the outcome anyone had expected when the Emperor first made his proposal, but it was, perhaps, exactly what both their civilizations needed.